560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when you're moving out. I said, when you're moving out.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. You all ask on Get Enough? When? April 22nd. Yeah, that's an event announcement. When? April 22nd. That would be this Saturday. Where? Millennium Park. Time, 5:30 p.m. until 100%. Bring your friends. Part two. This is Alderman Ray Lopez tweeting out, if I know, do you? Lightfoot, Chicago Police.
So part
last
one
Saturday,
was Friday and part two was Saturday.
So last Saturday was so successful, our nation's future leaders are planning another outing. So maybe Triple Threat and BLM Brandon and all those Safety Act legislators will volunteer to be chaperones. Because, as we know from that group, there was no mayhem. This is not a time to demonize our youth. And as Robert Peters tweeted, he's a state senator.
Oh, I know.
One of the co-sponsors of the Pritzker Purge Law.
He's a progressive person, that's for sure.
He tweeted, since I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm sure I'm going to get the most unhinged crime weirdo replies. Right. Mm-hmm. Here's what he said. He's prefacing, he knows he's going to get pushback on this. But why? Why would he get pushback? Here's his quote. I would look at the behavior of young people as a political act and statement. It is a mass protest against poverty and segregation. That's what you saw on Friday and Saturday. A mass protest against poverty and segregation. That's how it should be termed. And so, again, I would say the incumbent mayor, the incoming mayor, Senator Peters, and his co-sponsors of the Safety Act, his colleagues who co-sponsor the Safety Act, I would expect them to be out with the protesters, wouldn't you?
I mean, some people think that this, this behavior of these groups, it's a political act and a political statement. Race plus poverty equals crime, and you are going to pay for it. Because they cornered a white woman while she was walking into her apartment building at Michigan Avenue and Wabash. Get her blank, but you know what? And they did. And they not only hurt her, they hurt a white CTA bus driver who they punched through the window and made a little hole so they could keep punching him.
For more on this, or as the music so indicated, we're joined by Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints.org, for our weekly confab. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Good morning, Amy.
Well, when does that the Safety Act get ruled upon by our duly elected state Supreme Court so we can see if we're going to institutionalize what's happening in Chicago and Cook County to the rest of the state? Where are we on that?
Yeah, we're still waiting around on that, and I don't know the precise date. I haven't seen that, but that's the scary part. The minute that we continue that path we're on, eliminating bail, allowing, it's the number of crimes, we've talked about this in the past, the number of crimes which would not be, let's say, punishable in the same ways before would increase. And so the mayhem, let's use the word mayhem, will continue. But we need clarity from the Supreme Court, and then we'll know how crazy it gets.
Are you, is there anything that can surprise us anymore? But where are the voices not on conservative talk radio, not from law enforcement? Where are the voices in this region and the state at the political leadership level offering pushback, an alternative view, a honest assessment of the situation. I mean, again, to me, public policy making is a function of political power, and I know the Republican Party doesn't have any, but where is anybody speaking to this outside of those few outlets that I mentioned?
Dan, I can't find the voices, and that's what's phenomenal. And I think it's because we're still in the same trend. The pendulum is still swinging. And I'm going to switch off of crime for a second, but talk about education, where Johnson is about to take over CPS schools. And we've some of us have complained a lot about the reading results and the math results and how bad they've been. Right, that 1 out of 20 kids, only 1 out of 20 kids can do math at grade level based on the testing. Well, guess what? He's going to propose to get rid of the testing. And so we're still in that swing where the craziness is going to get deeper. But at some point, and we don't see it yet, I don't see the voices coming up against crime. I texted you earlier about some looking at New York City, and back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, they had horrific numbers on crime, and it seemed like New York was in a downward spiral to nowhere, when eventually groups, it's fascinating to read that. I just tweeted an article from City Journal, Manhattan Institute from a few years back, and they talked about how institutions, all of them collectively got ticked off, got sick of the crime, and they all started to act in a certain way. And that was before Giuliani and Bratton came in to push further on their broken windows policing. But we don't have that today. I don't see. I mean, I've heard of some people carrying more guns. I've heard of some groups trying to do stuff, but collectively we're still in that downward spiral. And I think we have to look and see. And I encourage everybody to read that City Journal article. Go to my tweet, go to Wirepoints Twitter, and you'll see how they started to put things together. And even the police at some point was against a lot of the policing stuff that finally came through. But eventually, if we're going to save the city, and I do argue, and I am hopeful that we will in some form, not under this mayor, maybe not under the next one, but at some point we're going to do it. And it's going to have to take the kind of leadership that we saw under Giuliani,
well,
even under Bloomberg, who kept the policies rather than got rid of them when he took over after.
Let's talk
Giuliani.
about New York today, because it's emblematic of Chicago. Why are we not getting the same data from Chicago drilled into people? They believe that there's nothing you can do. They believe that it's endemic. But if they knew exactly the scope of the problem and how much improved things could be if you took a few simple steps, then maybe some people completely lacking in courage would start to address the issue. The New York City Police Commissioner just reported nearly a third of all shoplifting arrests in New York last year involved 327 people. 327 people in New York City, a city of 8 million, were arrested and rearrested 6,000 times.
Talk about a repeat offender.
327 people, 6,000 arrests and rearrests, nearly a third of all shoplifting arrests. The victims also concentrated. The victims are concentrated. It was 18 department stores and 7 chain pharmacy locations that accounted for a fifth of all complaints. So, I mean, you could reduce crime, for example, just using this as an anecdote. You could reduce burglaries at at 1/5 of the locations and by 1/3 overall if you just remove 327 people who are habitual shoplifters from society and put them away for a long enough time to know that they're not just going to get turned out so they can do this again and we just continue this merry-go-round. And it's like that with, I mean, we know from talking to Rafael Manguel, who I know you know, and you know this data too, it's just, if we just focus the conversation a little bit, this is how accessible it is. This is how quickly and substantially we could reduce the incidence of crime and violent crime if we just focused on the small percentage of people who are responsible for a preponderance of it and remove them from society. That seems to me what should be the mantra.
Well, yeah, number one starts with understanding that what Brandon Johnson and Lori Lightfoot and Kim Foxx, the left right now is owning criminal justice, and so the populace, the broader populace at 50% plus one, is still voting for their stuff their claims that they'll make crime better the way they do it. And what's becoming obvious across the country is it doesn't work. But the media still owns the media still propagates this stuff. So right now we're in a hole because Brandon Johnson is going to keep pushing his stuff. But I was looking at the New York City numbers back in 1991. But coincidentally, I have to live there for 2 years at that time, and I remember the crime being pretty bad. 1991, New York City had over 2,000 murders in a year. And murder is the best thing to measure because it's kind of high. Some other data on robberies, thefts, you don't really know what's being reported, what is being reported. With deaths, you pretty much know it's good data. And so they went from almost 2,200 murders. They got it down to less than 400 murders, 400 murders in 2018. They've had a massive drop, and a lot of that had to do with they got serious, as you said, Dan. They got serious about crime. They started cleaning up the subway. They stopped people from jumping over the turnstile because once people know they can jump over the turnstile or paint graffiti or do whatever, then they know that they can do more. And so you saw this massive drop. Bragg, Manhattan DA Bragg is trying to take credit for some of that stuff, but Giuliani and their broken policing methods worked, among other things, right? Neighborhoods got engaged, institutions got engaged, but you can see there's a good template that we need to follow it, and at some point when we can move out the guys like the Brandon Johnson, Lori Lightfoot, and get in somebody who's serious about crime, we can get back into control of Chicago. But the question is it lost? And that's what a lot of people are asking.
Ted, I wanted to ask you about Governor Pritzker. He spoke at Harvard the other day, and I don't know if he's delusional or if he fell on his head, but this is talking about the population decrease in Illinois. He said did not happen.
We did a census in 2020. Turns out all the American Community Survey data wrong. We gained population in the state of Illinois.
Okay. So where do those alien Illinois residents live? Who is he talking about?
Well, yeah, so this is back to that whole debate about everybody thought that the Illinois population was going to drop about 250,000 during the decade of 2010 to 2020. Well, after they did the big census, it dropped only 18,000. And so, that was one big thing. So, no, the population didn't increase. It dropped 18,000. That's the fact. That's what census reports then and reports today. The big thing was, one is that Pritzker spent like $50 million to try to count more people. So he was probably successful at that. But what Pritzker leaves out is that we're still only one of 3 states in the entire country to shrink in that decade. It was West Virginia, Mississippi, and Illinois were the 3 shrinkers. He's hiding behind that. The other big part is that the census said that they maybe made some errors in how they calculate it based on a small sample. Well, it's something they say that they need to look at for the next census, but they have not changed their numbers. They will not change their numbers. Illinois shrunk, and Illinois is shrinking the last 2 years. So Pritzker's just hiding behind his typical messaging that he's pretty good at doing, by the way.
Well, it's a real simple question to follow up. If we gain population, why did we lose a congressional seat?
Yeah, that as well. And then there's also the IRS data. The IRS data is not a survey. It is hard data of who lives where when they file their taxes. And the IRS data shows us losing consistently 100,000 people on net to other states. So there's no hiding that. And clearly our population, our birth rate is down. Our immigrant from other countries is down. So that's why we're in trouble.
Well, half the people who are left will believe anything that Pritzker and these other Chicago pals say, and they know that. That's why they could care less losing, gaining. I mean, we're not gaining, but losing population at the pace that we're losing it, even though it's significant relative to the rest of the nation. It's not significant relative to them, and it gets better for them politically. This is what people didn't appreciate. One of the things I just repeat incessantly, don't appreciate what the composition of Illinois really is, didn't appreciate what the composition of Chicago is. A lot of Alice supporters didn't understand what the city actually is in 2023 versus how they remember it being not so long ago. It's just different, and but they paper it over with the beautiful lies they tell, and half the population, which is all they need, love hearing those beautiful lies, so it'll keep going that way until there's some sort of psychological break.
Yeah, I suggest everybody watch that Harvard. I watched it yesterday. I watched the Harvard discussion. Most of the Harvard kids, most of the kids who asked questions were from Illinois, so that was interesting, and you can pick up a lot from that. Hey, yeah, I want to mention one thing that's interesting too about the last couple of days, and that's we'll watch Brandon Johnson and how his own words and his own actions trap him, and let's see how he manages these things. One is on the taxes. Pritzker's already come out and said, well, that financial tax that Brandon's talking about, I don't think it's going to work. Right? We don't want to chase away the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and other financial companies. So that's going to start to hamper Brandon Johnson's goals at tax hikes. And
I don't think so.
No. What it means, it'll just send him in a path.
Pritzker's not going to hamper Brandon Johnson. Do you think that the movement Marxists look at J.B. Pritzker and think he's one of them?
My point is this: it'll force Brandon Johnson to look elsewhere for tax hikes. So watch out, because property taxes will be the one that he controls. He's promised not to do that, but that's where he's going to be forced to go to if the legislature doesn't support Brandon's form of tax hikes. And the other was,
Well, Governor Pritzker tried to talk him out. He does not want a transaction tax.
Governor Pritzker is irrelevant, except to the extent that he can buy off support to stop a LaSalle Street tax. He's irrelevant. He is not one of them. They are not listening to him. This is, again, the thing that I don't know. It's amazing I have to just explain the Democrat Socialist Party to a bunch of Democrat socialists in this city and state. For J.B. Pritzker, other than his checkbook, means nothing. He is just an impediment to these movement Marxists in charge of Chicago.
Yeah, I think that's right. He's still they're still going to have to negotiate which tax hikes are good and which ones aren't, and which ones, especially under a Pritzker potential presidential run, what does he want to signal and what doesn't he want to signal? So, but the other one is Brandon Johnson's words on the mayhem, right? He's sending big signals not only to Chicago, not only to the thugs, but also to the rest of the country about what he'll accept and won't accept in terms of riots and looting and whatever you want to call this, mayhem. So those are two big things that he's going to trap himself, and that'll be interesting to see how he manages that.
Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints.org, all things Illinois policy related. Ted, thanks as always.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Well, kids